Hi, my name's Andres. I'm going to be continuing some of these questions with you. You said that you felt that your son was being aggressively detained. Could you elaborate on that at all?
Sure. From what I could hear in the car, there were some elevated voices coming from the officer and Matt. And then all of a sudden, the officer pushed Matt against the hood of the car and was reaching around and putting, Josh put their hands up and down my son and reaching into pockets inside his pants, up his shirt.
And how did you feel at that point?
Distressed for my son.
And how long had that been going on to the point where you stepped out of the vehicle?
I'd say the whole exchange outside the car before I opened my door and got out was maybe 2 minutes.
Okay, and when you did step out of your vehicle, did you immediately reach for a phone? Did you already have a phone? Did you stand there for a little while?
I exited the vehicle and informed the officer that I was reaching for my phone in my pocket, and then I proceeded to reach toward it when I felt the pain hitting my chest.
And how did you inform the officer of that?
By saying I'm getting my phone.
Did the officer give any indication that the officer heard or understood?
Not that I recall.
Okay, and when you did reach into your pocket, would you say that the pain that you felt was instantaneous at that point, or was there several seconds before the taser was deployed?
I'd say maybe 1 second.
Okay, and the effect of the taser, where did it strike you?
Struck me approximately 4 inches below my neck on my sternum, but I only got hit by one probe the first time.
Okay, and could you describe what that felt like?
Yeah, it felt like essentially a cigarette butt to the chest, and then the subsequent pain shooting out from there.
And what did you do after you were struck with the taser?
I leaned over and removed the probe so as to stop the pain, except then it shocked my hand. So
It shocked your hand as you pulled it
as
out?
I pulled it out.
I got you. That sounds unpleasant. Do you remember what Officer Dennehy did after that point?
After that point, the officer was behind me and started to put me in handcuffs.
Did the officer say anything to you before that point?
Before tasing.
After the first taser and when the officer walked up to try to put you in handcuffs, was there any conversation going on at that point?
I was informed that I was being placed under arrest.
And what was your response to that?
At that point, the officer's hand was already on my arm, so I was relatively focused on the pain. So I said something to the effect of, you can't do this, and ouch, that hurts.
So the officer reached for your arm first and then informed you that you were under arrest, or the other way around?
I didn't have time to respond prior to the officer starting to detain me for arrest after I was told that I was being placed under arrest, but there was 2 seconds there.
Okay. And what did you do or say, or any actions that were taken after that point where you were told that you were being put under arrest? Anything further?
My arms were then behind my back, and I was struggling a little bit because of the range of motion with my arm, so I think I was probably screaming in some pain.
Were your arms behind your back because you had placed them there, or because the officer had pulled them there?
I had not placed them behind my back.
Okay, so was the officer in the process of pulling your arms behind your back while you were giving some distress as to the pain and range of motion?
Yes, the officer was having difficulty getting my right hand in the handcuff, but the left hand was already there.
And how long do you think this went on for until a taser was used?
The second time,
Yes,
I'd say it was probably 45 seconds, maybe a minute.
45 seconds. And during that point, did you inform the officer that you were struggling with range of motion issues
I did not have time.
during that 45 seconds? Okay. Did anyone else attempt to inform the officer?
I heard my son scream to the officer to watch out for my shoulder.
Did the officer say anything that would give you the impression that the officer heard or understood this?
Not that I recall.
Okay. Was anyone else, were your daughters saying or doing anything during this one?
I know that the back door was open, and I think Nora was saying something, but I honestly did not hear it or recollect it.
Well, was she saying something, or was she shouting something?
Honestly, it could have been shouting, but I do not recall exactly the elevation of her voice.
Do you know if your other daughter was saying anything at this point that you recall?
It's likely. There were definitely after the first taser, there was definitely some screaming, but I don't know which one of them was doing that.
Okay. And after you were tased for the second time, do you recall what occurred after that?
I do not.
blacked out.
Yes.
Okay. Could you describe any medical treatment that you saw after this incident?
Well, first we were brought to the station, and at the station we were looked at very generally, and then subsequently I had to go back for burns on my neck from the taser, and also I had to go through additional physical therapy for my shoulder.
Okay, did you go to an emergency room that night, or?
I did not. I was not brought to an emergency room.
Okay, and when you did see your physician, what was the prognosis in terms of additional damages? You said you needed more physical therapy. How much more?
Physical therapy, I've had about, since I just had the surgery, we hadn't set up the schedule yet, so I'm not sure how much that would have affected, but I do have 2 burn marks on my lower back and the burns on my neck.
Do you know what degree those burns were?
They were first degree.
At first degree burn.
And then,
Thank you.
yeah.
Hi.
Are you comfortable?
Sure.
So, because we've hit a lot of the basics, I'm going to be jumping around a little bit. So, to start off, what would you characterize as your level of recall surrounding the incident?
What part of the incident?
The entire affair. Were you entirely cogent and coherent, or would you describe yourself as tired, fatigued, exhausted?
I would not use fatigued or exhausted. I could say that since it was between 12 and 1 in the morning, I was probably a little bit tired, but that I'd say throughout the course of the event, my recollection got worse every time I was tased.
Okay, but you're quite sure of the truth of everything that you've described so far?
I'm testifying to the truth, my best knowledge.
Okay. And when the car was pulled over, what were the words that the officer used to tell your son to get out of the vehicle?
Step out of the vehicle.
And did you understand why your son was being asked to step out of the vehicle?
I inferred from the situation that the officer, based on my son's response to a question of have you been drinking, wanted to further that discussion outside of the vehicle.
Did you think therefore, that it was strange that your son was being asked to step out of the vehicle?
I thought it was different, but I don't have much experience with being pulled over, so I don't know if it's typically strange.
You said that you saw your son in the rear view and Officer Dennehy and this, what you described as groping.
Through the windshield?
Through the windshield, right. You also described, though, that you don't have the best vision. What is your... I don't have the best vision either, so there's a range.
Oh, I meant through the windshield from the vantage point. I could not perfectly see what was happening, which is why I wanted to get out of the vehicle.
And
I do not wear glasses.
I believe what the officer was doing was a pat-down, which I believe is standard procedure for an officer. You never been on a plane, had to get on a plane?
Objection, relevant.
I'm trying to see if Ms. Paul is familiar at all with the concept of a pat-down.
I have been on a plane. I've walked through a metal detector.
And have any of the TSA agents ever, you've never seen any of
I've
them?
never seen them put their hand down someone's pants.
Was it, and you're sure it was down his pants?
Yes.
What exactly did you hear from the officer and your son, and which voice did you hear first?
At what time?
Before you stepped out of the vehicle, when you were assessing whether or not you were going to step out of the vehicle?
I believe, based on the pitch, that it was the officer who spoke first.
Did you hear what the officer said at that time?
I only heard elevated voices and what sounded like arguing.
Okay. And so you were concerned about the raised voices, and you wanted to see what was going on outside the vehicle. You said you wanted to call for help if necessary. Who were you planning on calling?
Hopefully another officer.
Okay. And So when you stepped out of the vehicle, how much time passed between you stepping out of the vehicle and you reaching your hand into your pocket?
Only a few seconds.
You said that you weren't quite sure of the words that you used when you objected to the officer's conduct. You said, "That's my son, what are you doing?" Could it have been, "You can't arrest my son, don't touch my son"?
It was, no, it could have been something more the effect of, "You can't touch him like that, get your hands off my son, I'm getting my phone."
And you recall that very clearly now.
I do now, yes, my recollection is much
So
clearer.
when you said earlier that you were sure that everything that you had set up to, anyway. And what words were exchanged between you and Officer Dennehy after you exited the vehicle, if any?
We did not exchange words in a typical conversation. I said what I had just testified to, and then I was informed I was being placed under arrest, and then I was responding to the pain in my arm.
What words were used for that,
For what part?
for that arrest?
For the arrest.
For your arrest?
For my arrest. Just, I would assume what's the standard protocol is saying, you are under arrest. I was not given a reason.
And what was the distance between you and the officer when the prongs hit you
The first time?
the first time?
The officer was still up with my son at the front of the vehicle, and I was just coming to around the passenger side door. So the average width of a hood, I would assume, is somewhere near 6-7 feet.
Okay. And you described the effect of the first taser deployment as kind of a cigarette burn.
Yes.
What was the effect of the second taser deployment?
Significantly more painful. It was more that of having a direct flame against my back.
Is that time? Thanks very much.
Good morning, Ms. Paul.
Good morning.
Forgive me if we go over anything that my previous co-counsel had gone over. It's a long day, trust me, it's over after this. How are you doing, by the way?
I'm doing fine, thank you.
Cool, awesome. All right, let's start out with a few basic questions. Married, divorced, single?
Currently single.
Currently single, awesome. Where do you work? How long have you worked there?
Objection, irrelevant.
All right. So, purely for demonstrative purposes, can you stand up and show me how you reached in your jacket pocket that night?
Sure. I don't have a jacket on though, is that okay?
Yes,
Okay.
just purely for demonstrative purposes.
So I reached into my my left jacket pocket for it because my right arm
It was
couldn't
in a
get
center
up.
pocket right here?
Right on the side of the jacket.
Okay, so you reached in,
This
it was
way.
on your right side,
It's my left side.
and you reached in with your left hand.
Correct.
All right,
Is that good?
yes,
Okay.
thank you. And why exactly did you do that again?
I was hoping to, if necessary, call either the police or to alert the officer that there was, like, I had my phone if it was needed.
And you were concerned about your son, correct?
Correct.
Why exactly?
Well, he essentially was being shoved up against the hood of the car very aggressively, and I wanted to make sure that A, he was okay, and that B, the officer, either that wasn't necessary to kind of get him to cooperate.
Mhm. I mean, have you done that, had this kind of history with your son before? You've stepped in where he's being, has a physical altercation and you have to step in and,
I have not seen my son in
Okay.
this type of physical altercation
Okay.
before.
awesome. And so, 62 years old, correct?
Yes.
And you've never had a run-in with the police?
Nope.
Never, not even a parking ticket?
I might have gotten a parking ticket,
Okay.
but I would not have been at my vehicle to see the police officer give it to me.
Okay. What's your general opinion of police?
My general
Objection.
General opinion.
Irrelevant.
I'm just trying to establish why she reacted the way she did that night.
I think that, police officers obviously have their job in society, and it's related to public safety, and that they shouldn't go beyond the necessary means to keep to that situation. But I've had no negative feelings toward police officers prior to this incident.
Okay. Have you ever seen any videos circulating online with people reaching into their pockets and officers shooting them?
I'm not great at technology, so not
Okay.
really.
Okay. I mean, what did you think was going to happen when the officer saw you reaching into your
Well,
pocket?
that's why I told the officer that I was getting my phone, because I think that if there's any sort of movement of someone during an arrest, you want to let the officer know what you're doing.
Okay. How loud do you think you were when you informed the officer that you were
I can
reaching
be
in
pretty
your pocket?
loud.
Okay. You can be pretty loud, but how loud were you when that happened, when you said that?
I was definitely elevating my voice to make sure the officer could hear me.
Okay. And so after the altercation between you and Officer Denny, you went back to the station and you said you saw, you were seen at the station generally, and you weren't seen for the prong on your neck until when?
I went as soon as I was released on bail.
So the next day?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. And just going back prior, do you know how many drinks your son, you said he had around 2 that night?
I believe 2, perhaps 3, but no more than that.
Okay, what about your daughters?
They definitely partook more in the alcohol at the
Mhm.
restaurant. I'd say that one, probably Nora had about 6 drinks, which
Okay.
she's like a 1-drink kind of person, so that was a bold choice.
Okay,
But Kelly had maybe 4 or 5.
okay, awesome. And Nora was the one that was trying to get out of the vehicle when you were hit by the first taser?
I don't know if she got out of the vehicle. I just know that the back door was open when I was tased the second time.
Okay. All right, so after being struck by the first taser and before the second taser, was there a physical altercation between you and Officer Denny?
Are you referring to when the officer put my hands on my
Correct.
back?
Correct.
Yes, that happened.
Okay, awesome. And who initiated it?
I did not initiate my own arrest.
Okay, awesome. Well, all right. How did you respond to your hands being put behind your back?
My left hand was fine. I placed it behind my back. My right hand, because of the surgery, I had limited range of motion, so I was struggling and it was very painful. So I was a little frustrated and I couldn't get my arm behind my back.
Okay, and that's why you were yelling at Officer Denny?
Yes, that's when I was yelling.
All right. So, on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you describe the pain of the first taser?
The first taser,
Yeah.
I guess 10 being,
10 being the worst, 1
Right.
being very minimal.
I'd say probably a 6.5 to a 7,
Okay, second one?
10.
10, okay. How long did the pain last on the second taser?
I do not recall because I blacked out after it.
Okay.
So when I woke up, when I came back to consciousness, I guess I felt the pain still,
Okay,
but it was not as strong.
that's tired.
Does the judge allow us to ask one more question
Or 2 more.
or 2 more questions?
Yes. Yeah, all right.
Hold on, Charisse.
Yes, I'll hold on. All right, one more.
Ms. O'Donnell, you testified earlier,
Paul.
Ms. Paul, excuse me. Ms. Paul, you testified earlier that you were looking out of the windshield, is that correct?
That's correct.
Where was your son and Officer Dennehy when you were looking out the windshield?
They were in front of the driver's side near the hood of the car.
All right, no further questions.
All right, hi, Mrs. Paul, how are you? I just have 2 questions. Well, one, what is your son's height and weight?
My son is taller than I am. I guess he's close to 6'3", maybe 6'4", and
What's his weight?
he weighs more than I do, which is probably, I'd say somewhere around 250.
Thank you so much.
Good job, you guys. Thank you so much, Ms. Paul.